Morning and welcome to our webinar in relation to the latest developments and challenges in DNA testing. My name's Ashley Hodgkinson. I'm the Sample Collections Manager here at AlphaBiolabs, and I'm joined today by my colleague Casey Randall, who is the Head of DNA Testing. Apologies that Andrew hasn't joined us today. If you've been on one of these before, you'll know him well. He's not feeling too great at the moment, so he's left it in our capable hands and we'll hopefully be able to answer any questions that you may have. So the agenda for today, we're going to talk briefly about what DNA testing is, so how it's conducted and what we're looking for here at AlphaBiolabs. We're also going to go through all the different types of DNA testing that are on offer. Hopefully that sort of information that Casey provides will help you in your decisions on which type of test will be most suitable for your client, depending on the circumstances at the time that you were looking to instruct a DNA test. Casey will also explain to you about an extended 45 marker analysis that we can offer and how this may be beneficial to cases. We'll then move on to looking at prenatal paternity testing that we can offer for you as well, if that is suitable, and in what type of circumstances you may look to use that type of test. We'll discuss what is on offer if you have someone who maybe has passed away and is no longer available to provide a sample, and the options for that, which is known as a viability study. I'll then talk briefly about reporting, what your options are once the report is ready to be issued, and then we'll have a question and answer session at the end. So if you're familiar with Zoom technology, you may have used this before, but if you're not, there is a little Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you click on it, it'll allow you to type in any questions that you might have for us. Please do use that function throughout the presentation. And then once Casey has finished explaining all of the topics that we're going to discuss today, we'll have a look through the questions and answer as many of them as possible. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Casey now, who'll be talking you through, first of all, what is DNA testing?
Thank you, Ashley. Good morning. Yes, so my name's Casey Randall. I'm the Head of DNA Testing, and I've worked here at AlphaBiolabs since January 2012. So I've got a lot of experience in the field. I am a scientist. My background is in forensic science, and I've got a master's degree with distinction in DNA profiling, which makes me ideally suited for this type of role. I also work alongside a team of highly skilled scientists. So we have people with backgrounds in forensics, genetics, biology, biochemistry, and we have a really rigorous training and competency assessment program to make sure that everybody in our team is very highly skilled. We are a UCAS 17025 accredited laboratory, which means that we have very high standards of quality that are implemented all the way throughout the testing processes. And we do maintain very, very strict high quality standards. So first of all, what is DNA? In a nutshell, it's a very long, very complex molecule found in the nucleus of most cells. It's a chain of letters represented by A, G, C, and T, and these are the nucleotide bases. And your DNA is arranged as 23 pairs of chromosomes, and you get half of your DNA from each biological parent. Your DNA is unique to each person, with the exception of identical twins. And by analysing DNA markers, these DNA markers are specific regions within the DNA that are known to be hypervariable between individuals. We can use these profiles to determine whether individuals are related. So these DNA markers, these DNA profiles that we're generating, they're the exact same DNA profiles that would be used, say, on the National DNA Database or in forensic laboratories. It's the exact same technology. It's just applied in a slightly different way where we can do these kinship studies. So what are the types of DNA tests that we can offer? First of all, there are the parentage tests. These are direct paternity and maternity tests to show whether a man or a woman is the true biological parent of a child. These tests are great. They provide the most conclusive results, and they're very straightforward because the alleged parent should share 50% of their DNA with that child. We can also do complex scenarios. So these might be cases that include closely related relatives, such as a a case where you might have two brothers that are both the potential father of a child, we can do that test with either one or both of those fathers taking part. We also had a very interesting maternity case recently, a legal case, where the alleged mother claimed that her daughter was the product of incest and that the biological father of her daughter was her own father. And we were able to carry out the DNA testing and prove that that had indeed happened. So we can do the straightforward tests. We can also do more complex scenarios. We're able to plug that into the algorithm and give you a reliable result in those situations. We also offer a lot of sibling tests. So this will allow us to establish whether individuals are likely to share no parents in common, one parent in common, or both parents in common. So whether they're unrelated, half siblings, or full siblings. So what we get a lot of the time is we just get a lot of pairs of siblings, two individuals, are we related or not? Again, though, we can do more complex scenarios. So if you know sibling 1 and sibling 2 are definitely full siblings, you know they've got the same mum and dad and there's no question about that, but there's another individual who believes that they might be a half sibling, they might share a father in common, we can also put that into the test, and it becomes more conclusive when you can add more depth to the scenario. I've written here about inconclusive results. Essentially, what an inconclusive result means is that we can't say one way or another whether people are likely to be related or unrelated. So we don't really get inconclusive results with paternity and maternity tests because they are direct. They pretty much will always get a conclusive result unless there is a very complex scenario behind them. With all of these next tests that I'm going to talk about, there is a chance of getting an inconclusive result, but we can add more DNA markers or we can include more sample donors to help to get that conclusive result. I've also said that we could consider the Y chromosome test for paternally related males. So the Y chromosome is passed directly from father to son through the generations. For this reason, if a man has 10 sons, they will all share an identical Y chromosome profile. This is why it'd be really good to show that these 10 people are all brothers because they've all got the same profile as each other. If those 10 sons all went on to have 10 sons of their own, we've then got a very large family that have all got the same Y chromosome. So what a Y chromosome test can't do is it can't tell you exactly how the participants are related to one another. So it can't distinguish between siblings, uncle and nephew, grandfather and grandson, because everybody's got the same Y chromosome. However, it's very, very powerful in placing individuals within families. So if you know that these two people could only be related in one way, and there's no option that they are uncle and nephew, grandparent and grandson, then a Y chromosome test is a very, very strong alternative to offering one of these indirect tests. The next test is the aunt or uncle avuncular test. And this is often used when the alleged parent of the child is unable to provide a sample. So a lot of cases, it's the alleged father that is being questioned. In most scenarios, we do know who the mother of the child is, but it's the alleged father that we want to confirm. If that alleged father is unavailable or unwilling to participate in a test, you can instruct an aunt or uncle test whereby his full siblings take part in his place. And that will allow us to say whether they are biologically related to the child, and therefore you would know that the alleged parent who hasn't participated is the true father of the child. Also briefly touched on grandparent testing already, but it's a really powerful test when you can get both grandparents to participate. The grandparent test works in a slightly different way when you have both grandparents, because what we can do is we can look at the DNA profiles of the grandmother and the grandfather, and we can determine whether it is possible that they have a child that is then the biological father of the grandchild in question. So it's a really strong and powerful test, and when you use both grandparents, you don't often get an inconclusive result. We often can't get both grandparents to participate, so the test can still be carried out with one grandparent. We would recommend, if possible, the mother of the child takes part in the test. Again, adding more individuals will help us to achieve a conclusive result. And then we can carry out that statistical analysis and we can work out your likelihood ratio, which will be put into your report. We have started to offer now brand new cousin test. So this one uses 45 DNA markers as standard. Cousins are very difficult to determine whether people are related as cousins or whether they're unrelated. So first cousins are likely to only share 12.5% of their DNA in common. It makes it very difficult then to distinguish, are they related or are they unrelated? When they're so low, the percentage could range from sort of 5 to 15%. And if you're down at that lower end, it can be quite difficult. So that's why we have an increased number of DNA markers for this test. Again, I've written there that we should consider the Y chromosome test for paternally related males, as it may be beneficial, it may provide a conclusive result, especially if you only know that there's one potential way that they could be related to each other. So I've touched on the extended marker test, and I just want to explain it in a little bit more detail. Our standard DNA test uses 25 DNA markers, whereas our advanced test uses 45 DNA markers. The DNA markers are locations within the DNA profile that are variable. So we're targeting different regions of the DNA that we know can help us to distinguish between people. The standard test is more DNA markers than many other labs, and it is suitable for most DNA test types. It's a very powerful test and it is a good test. However, the 45 marker test, you have an increased number of markers, which means that there is more genetic evidence that we're able to draw a conclusion from. So 25 markers in straightforward paternity and maternity tests, it's a great option. It's a lower price point than the 45 marker test, and it does the job for straightforward paternity and maternity tests. It also is a very good test for zygosity. If you ever have a scenario where you need to determine whether twins, triplets, higher order multiples are genetically identical or whether they're non-identical, 25 markers is suitable for that. And we do use 25 markers, and the majority of sibling and kinship cases will get a result, but 20 to 25% of them will be inconclusive and will require further testing to be able to provide a result. The 45 marker test, our advanced test in comparison, has an additional 20 DNA markers on top of the standard 25. It gives us more genetic evidence, which means we're less likely to get an inconclusive result. For sibling and kinship cases, this goes down to less than 10%. And it also reduces the risk of getting a false result compared to when using 25 markers. It's much less likely that people are going to adventitiously match each other when you're looking at such a wide coverage of the genome. And 45 markers are really, really useful when we've got a complex query. So if there's a father or uncle scenario, if there's cousins, 45 markers is what we would strongly recommend. It will always give us greater assurance in our results. So if you were to use this in a paternity test, for example, and you were to see that with a 25 marker test, your likelihood of the two individuals being related as parent and child, you might see that that is 100,000. However, when you add the additional markers, you might see that that jumps up to be 1 million. So you're going to get a stronger inclusion. You're going to get a higher likelihood of relatedness. Conversely, if we were to say that the two individuals are not related as parent and child, if we observe mismatches between the DNA profiles, it's not possible that those two individuals are related. So in a standard 25 marker test, for example, you might see that 5 markers don't match, and therefore the result is an exclusion. However, when you use 45 markers, you might see that 15 of the markers don't match, which again gives you greater assurance in those results. We are offering the 45 DNA markers in line with our standard turnarounds. So typically they're next day as standard, or same day. If you're in court, if you've got some urgency, we can do your results same day for you. I've included some tables here that show your percentage chance of obtaining a conclusive result in different scenarios. So the paternity and maternity testing, you can see that there isn't a great increase between your chance of getting a conclusive result. However, your likelihoods that you achieve or your number of exclusions is going to be much higher than what you would get on the advanced test than with the standard test. However, when we look at the sibling tests on this side of the table, full siblings, you've got a 74% chance of getting a result with 25 markers, or 86% if you use the extended study 45 marker test. You can see there it jumps again if you were to include the mother of the siblings. So in a scenario where you have two siblings who know they have the same mother, they want to see if they have the same father, they want to confirm that for an inheritance claim or something similar, you can see if you include the mother, your chance of getting a conclusive result with 45 markers is 98.1%. So it's a really strong test. I hope the examples here do show that including the mothers or the known parents or additional individuals will always help to get a more conclusive result. I've also included tables for aunt, uncle, grandparents and cousin testing. Just to highlight again what I said about cousin testing, it's very difficult. So using 25 DNA markers, you've only got a 21.4% chance of getting a conclusive result in a cousin test. However, that increases to 35.7% if you are able to do the 45 marker test. We also really strongly recommend that in cousin cases, we get the parents. And if you can include two parents, for example, the mother of both cousins, you would get 71.5% chance of getting a result. So most of our testing that we've already discussed uses a buccal swab sample. So this is a cheek swab sample collected using a large cotton bud from the inside of the mouth. However, there are some cases where it's not possible to obtain a buccal swab sample, and these often are cases where the alleged parent is deceased. So in these cases, we can use nail clippings, either fingernail or toenail clippings. We can use blood samples, or we can use tissue samples. All of these sample types can be collected by an independent third party so that the chain of custody is intact, and the samples can be sent directly to the laboratory so that chain isn't broken. So we can collect these samples and use them for legal purposes. The next type of testing that I want to discuss is prenatal testing. So this is slightly different to the method that we use for standard DNA testing because we utilize next generation sequencing. It's also known as massively parallel sequencing. So you may have heard either of those terms or the acronyms NGS or MPS. So prenatal testing using NGS is essentially a way of looking at the DNA that we observe in much more detail. So say, for example, at a particular DNA marker, I have an allele 10 and you do the test and you also have an allele 10. So using our standard method, we would look and we say, oh, look, we both share a 10. Therefore, maybe there's a chance that we're related to one another. However, using next generation sequencing, you can see every single base pair within that allele 10. So you can see the A, G, C, and T pattern that makes up my version of allele 10. And we can compare it to your version of allele 10. And we would then say, no, they're two different versions. So therefore, it's not a relationship between the two individuals. So it's this really high level of detail that we can look, and it's really useful for these prenatal testing that allows us to determine who the father of a child is before the baby is born. It's 100% safe and it's non-invasive. All that the test requires is a blood sample from the mother. The test can be taken after the 7th week of pregnancy, all the way up until the point of labour. And we do recommend the later in pregnancy that you are able to leave the test the better, the more chance you have of getting a successful result straight off the bat. It allows us to develop our safeguarding plans early. You can assess potential carers. You can reduce care costs by making sure that the baby is placed with a suitable guardian as soon as possible after birth. And it's better for the baby and for the family just to know the parentage of the child before it's born. Our prenatal testing is accredited to 17025 standards, and our results are accepted by UK courts. Moving on then from that type of testing, we also have newly started to offer ancestry testing, which will determine which ethnic group an individual is likely to come from. We have a range of different ancestry DNA tests, and these include the two most popular, which are the DNA Origins Ancestry Test. This is a basic ancestry test that will put you into a region where you're likely to have originated from based on your DNA profiling. This type of test is carried out using NGS, next generation sequencing. So it's very detailed, and you'll get a report that details where the individual is likely to have come from. It typically will put you into broad groups: European, South Asian, East Asian, things like that. And we also have the paternal lineage test. This one is a Y chromosome specific test. So where we talked before about this large Y chromosome family that we built up with the man with 10 sons who all went on and had 10 sons, what we can do, because the Y chromosome is passed on in that way, and it's been passed on that way since time began, we can do a paternal lineage test that will determine where in the world individuals are likely to have originated from. So this is following the out of Africa migration model, and essentially as humans moved out of Africa and started to settle into different areas and breed with people from that same area, the Y chromosome began to diversify and change as people adapted to their surroundings. So it's a really, really interesting test, actually, even not for legal purposes, just for curiosity to know a little bit more about yourself and your family history. If you're a female, obviously you can't take part in the paternal lineage test because you don't have a Y chromosome. But if you have a father or a full brother, they can take part on your behalf, and their results will also indicate your paternal lineage. So it's a really good test, and it is brand new. Only a cheek cell swab sample is required, and results for the paternal lineage test are available in 2 days. The DNA Origins Ancestry test are available within 7 days. So we're now going to show you a little bit about reporting. I'm going to hand back over to Ashley for this part.
So we just wanted to cover briefly what will happen once your results are ready and how they will be sent out to you, what kind of format they'll be in. So the standard report that you would receive if you didn't choose to add on a statement of witness would be a certificate of analysis. So it will display the results for you, and it'll have a short write-up to explain what they may mean. And it will include, obviously, the details of who was tested. If you did want more information about the test, if you didn't feel that that was sufficient, you can opt for a statement of witness report. So this is a much more in-depth report, including things like the qualifications of the person that wrote the report for you. So like Casey mentioned at the beginning, which scientists wrote them and what their prior experience is. It'll also detail the chain of custody collection process. So information about the photograph and identification of the sample donor, because the main thing about legal testing is that you have to have a chain of custody maintained throughout the collection process. And part of that process is taking a photograph of the sample donor and asking them for some identification. And this allows us to show to you who presented as that sample donor for the testing, so you can be sure that the correct people were tested. Without that photograph, the sample collection can't go ahead, and that would be included in the statement of witness report. And it'll also have a results table in showing which markers were tested, depending on whether you have the 25 marker test or the 45 marker test as well. And we are running a special promotion at the moment, which gives 25% off to all legal DNA testing, including that prenatal paternity testing that Casey mentioned. and this is live until the 31st of October this year. So if you were looking to instruct some testing with us, all you need to do is quote DNA 25, either on your referral form or when you call or email in, and we'll apply that discount for you. So shall we have some questions? There's been a few coming through. If anyone does have any, please do pop them in the Q&A box and we'll answer as many as we can, obviously wanting to make sure we stick to the time. And any that we can't get through, we will pop on the website later on so that you can still see the answers to any questions. So the first one that was coming up, but we'll start with the easiest one, Casey,
Okay.
was how long do the tests take? So I know you covered this in parts, but could you summarise on turnaround times for us?
Yes, of course. So as standard, all of our standard straightforward DNA testing, so paternity, maternity, siblings, aunts, uncles, grandparents, cousins, they are all done next day as standard, or you can upgrade to a same day test if you've got an urgent requirement to get those results turned around within the same day. For a prenatal test, we're offering them with a 6-day turnaround. Again, there isn't an option to upgrade to express. And this means that your test will be completed within 4 days. The ancestry test is 7 days as standard, and the paternal lineage is 2 working days.
Okay, what about viability studies? Because we've had a question about that.
Okay, so viability studies, we say they can take up to 5 days. Typically, the viability studies don't produce usable DNA profiles straight off the bat like a buccal swab would, so they require a little bit more care and attention. So they require a different type of extraction, and we might try a couple of different ways to really enhance that DNA profile to get it to be the best that it can be to be used for a legal case.
So a viability study, just to clarify, is obtaining a sample that's not a cheek cell, usually toenails, thigh tissue, from someone who's deceased, and testing it to ensure that there is a profile to then be able to do a further study.
Yes, that's correct.
Fab. There was another question about viability studies. I'm assuming, please do correct me if I'm wrong in the Q&A box, that it's in relation to like an estate. So if they do a viability study and test one, for example, child, but then someone else comes forward later down the line, how long they've got to use that sample for?
Okay, so the samples, after we analyse any sample, we only retain the actual sample extract for 3 months. However, we do keep the profiles and the case data for 4 years. So as long as they come back within that time frame, we would be able to reuse the DNA profile to see if somebody else is related to that individual, but we wouldn't be able to carry out a different type of test unless it was in the 3-month window where we still have the sample extract.
Okay, fab. So if they were doing a paternity test, taken that the viability study worked and we had that profile, and then another child came forward, we could then perform another paternity test with that child.
We could for up to 4 years, yes.
Perfect. There was a question about sample collections in a hospital. Do you want me to take that one?
Yeah, sure.
So it was a question about how soon after birth we can take a sample and whether we can attend a hospital to do so. So basically, we can take a sample as soon as after birth as you feel you're comfortable with or mum is comfortable with. We don't have a time constraint on that. You don't have to wait a certain amount of time after birth. We can attend the hospital to obtain a sample, and we do quite often do that. Then we can offer the upgrade of same day if you were looking to place the child before they leave the hospital. We can help with that. We can basically attend most places to take a sample, prisons, your offices, donors' home addresses, and we have our free walk-in clinics as well. So we have 13 of them. If it's more suitable for your donor to come to us, we can offer that as well. Someone is asking, would you recommend a cousin test over a Y chromosome test?
Depends on the scenario, but I would say if these people are paternally related, they know that there's no other option, no other way that they can be related to each other, I would say do a Y chromosome test. If you've got a couple of sample donors who would be able to also be willing to participate, so if you wanted to go down the cousin option, you would then need to get ideally the mothers of the 2 cousins. So it's just more people to kind of organise, I guess. And the Y chromosome test is very, very powerful, as long as you know that there's no potential that they are related in another way.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're wanting to confirm that the relationship is cousins, then it wouldn't be the Y chromosome test, would it?
No.
And you want to make sure that you understand that that will work, I guess, because you are looking solely on the male side, rather than if there's a mum in there that's related, then it's obviously not going to work.
Yeah, exactly.
But get in contact with us if you do have a situation where you're unsure what the best type of test would be. Please do get in touch with us and we can advise you accordingly on it. There is another question here similar to that about will you identify with us that the 45 marker test would be more suitable and provide an additional quote if we instruct for a cousin test?
So for the cousin test, it will be quoted and the 45 markers will be included as standard. The success rates with 25 markers is too low, so we would only ever start with the 45 markers. So that is included in your quote as it is. For all other types of testing, we can provide quotes for 25 or 45, and you can decide from there.
Yeah, the goal is to be sure that you get the best outcome for the testing. So if we look at something and think, oh, you've requested one thing, but another test might be more suitable, we'll have that discussion, we'll get in touch, and then you can weigh up your options and decide from there. Yeah, and I guess that's where your table comes in. Oh, sorry, Casey.
Sorry, I was going to say, what you can also do is you can go ahead and do the 25 marker test. A lot of those cases will get a result, and if it is inconclusive, we can then do the 45 marker test. As long as we get that instruction within the 3 months that we still hold the sample, we can repeat the analysis with more markers.
Yeah, so if they opted to stick with a 25 and then it came back inconclusive, they've got a window to be able to upgrade it anyway, haven't they?
You do, yeah.
Perfect. Time for one last question before we go.
Yeah.
Someone is asking, can you test a sample of hair to confirm DNA rather than a buccal swab? No,
is the short answer. So you can only get DNA profiles from hair if the hair has been pulled from the head and you have a visible hair root, and you would need upwards of 10, maybe 20 to 30 roots of hair. So the hair has to be pulled from the head. So in forensic cases, there are often cases where hair is pulled from the head and the root is available for analysis. But if you cut your hair, the root is not there. If your hair drops out, the root might not be there. So we can't use hair in that way that's been cut or on a hairbrush or anything like that, because the root isn't there and the DNA will not be able to get the DNA from that.
But I think the main thing to remember as well is we always need to have consent for these types of tests, because it is a legal test. So it's not that you can just kind of send something in on behalf of someone else. Everyone needs to consent to it, provide photographs, provide identification. Potentially they might be on about a deceased sample and they haven't got any other options. But if you're just asking for curiosity, there's your answer. If you do have a case where that was the only sample available, please get in touch and we'll be able to advise if there's any other way, maybe by testing other family members, that we can prove or disprove that relationship. Fab. So just two last things from us. Firstly, I thank you for joining us. We do offer an AlphaBiolabs promise of most DNA test results issued next day as standard, and we can offer you that same day upgrade if it's suitable and you need it, with the exception obviously of the ones we discussed, your ancestry and your prenatal, because they do take a little bit longer. As Casey mentioned before, we are an accredited laboratory, so we're accredited by the Ministry of Justice, and we also hold the UCAS ISO 17025 and ISO 9001 accreditations as well. So all that's left to say is thank you so much for joining us this morning and taking time out of your day. We hope you found it beneficial. We are the experts in legal DNA, drug and alcohol testing. So if you have any questions in relation to this webinar, previous webinars, or just a general question about any of the tests we offer, please do get in touch with us. You can access lots of information on our website. You can email into us, you can give us a call, and we're also available on social media if that's your preference. So thank you very much. We hope you enjoyed it. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope to see you on our next webinar.